how to build a monster log press even if you've been stuck for years. Let's take a step-by-step approach to figuring out how we're going to improve your log press. So we've got two steps that are kind of merged together. I'm going to call them 1A and 1B. Step 1A is to groove your technique. The log clean and push press or jerk, whichever movement, or floor to overhead we'll call it. Whichever movement you want to do requires technique. The person with the better technique is going to be more efficient. If you're more efficient, you can save energy. If you can save energy, you can use more energy when it's needed because you're conserving it. For instance, I get athletes, they struggle with the deadlift, which is embarrassing. If you can't deadlift less than half of your max deadlift from the floor from an 18-inch pull, you've got issues. It's usually motor pattern issues. But if you use an incredible amount of energy there, you've then got less energy for the clean. And for instance, if your clean is also poor and inefficient in using more energy there, then you have less energy to perform the leg drive or the lockout you see my point? So the idea is we want to be efficient. So we want to use the best technique possible regardless of the athlete. Step 1B, which kind of comes hand in hand with 1A, hence why I've called them 1A and 1B, is to improve mobility issues. I go into way more depth on the log press module, but there are 3 positions you need to maximize your mobility in. The first position is when the log is on your lap. The second position is when the log is on the chest or the rack position. And then the last position is overhead. And I'll give you a quick example of one of my athletes, Kane Francis. He came to me and he had a lot of mobility issues. We've improved a lot of them. We're still working to improving them now. But when Kane was going to lock the log out, it was like he had a handbrake on because of his lack of shoulder mobility. So you need to work on the mobility problems in tandem, hand in hand with the technique. Now you don't have to be OCD with technique. Ideally we want to make steps towards technique being optimal. And people kind of overthink. I get so many athletes, so what technique cue do I need? And it's not as easy as this is the technique cue and all of a sudden your lift goes through the roof. It can happen like that, but it's not all the time. So with my athletes, I've got an 8 to 12 week block. I just want to fix one variable. I just want their deadlift phase to look better. I just want their clean, the squat phase to look better. So they take the whole block and they fix one thing. Again, it comes back to previous times I've spoke about the principle of one thing. I'd rather at the end of 8 weeks, they have nailed one thing and we can move on to the next one. And then the next one and the next one, and it slowly builds. I'm not a massive believer in technique has to be perfect from day dot. We want to strive towards perfection over the long term, but it doesn't have to be perfect every single rep. Step 2, if you want big log presses and you want to improve your log max, is to train all the main lifts. Now I have a plethora of predictor lifts. What are predictor lifts? Predictor lifts are lifts whereby if you improve them to a certain ratio, it then feeds the log. So think of it as a pyramid. We've got the log at the top, 2 main lifts, below that are actually going to be front squat and strict press. So if you want your log to go up, we need to hit obviously the top of the pyramid, log PBs. You forget that a 6 RM builds the base for a 5 RM, builds the base for a 3, 2, and 1. So you need rep PBs if you expect to hit a new 1 RM. If you're going through a block and you're not hitting rep PBs, it's unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely you're going to then have an effect on the higher percentage and lead to a new 1 RM. It just doesn't, I just don't see it happen. Front squat is a massive predictor lift, and so many of my athletes, when they come to me, are way far behind just normal strength ratios. Again, I go through all the ratios in depth because within the front squat, you've obviously got the back squat, you've got the barbell hack squat, and loads of other things that can feed that. But the front squat is a massive predictor for log because it's an anterior chain loaded movement. And if you use the front squat with straps like I recommend, you are mimicking, by the fact that you will have your neck neutral, you are mimicking the position you are going to hold the log on your chest. It's a fantastic improver of leg drive and log rack strength. After that, you've got strict, and there's different variations. The most obvious one is just a strict log, or I call it an Olympic style press, where you can use a little bit of momentum. But even then, I started with a strict log, so there was no counter movement whatsoever until I noticed that I'd reached my limit on that, and then went to the Olympic style press. Other strict presses, you could look at feeding that strict press. So behind the neck press, it's massive bang for your buck lift. Swiss bar press. Again, the Swiss bar is a neutral grip. The difference between that and the log is a partial. So the log, you've got the diameter of it, it rests on your chest, whereas a Swiss bar, you can now press through a full range, so you've got another option there. And then adding to that, I would also use seated presses to specifically work on shoulder strength, but taking the lower body out of it and the stability element out of it. And the angles I would use for the strict presses would be either 80, 70, and I wouldn't go any lower than 60 degrees, even if you press like Kiełowski or Andrew Flynn, where they obviously lean back and hyperextend a lot to press through that. But if you want to get good at the log, you need these predictor lifts, these main lifts, to feed into the log, and then you need the log rep PBs to feed into the 1RM. Step 3 is to periodize accordingly. So as I said, you've got the 6 RMs that lead to the 5, 3, 2, 1 RM. The way to periodize, or the way I've periodized with a lot of success, is to start with the lower percentages and just build up. I don't do this linearly. I would do this linearly over a line of best fit. So if you plotted a graph, it would look like it's going straight up, but it's actually up and down, up and down, up and down, because I like to alternate phases of accumulation and intensification, phases of volume, but also intensity. Intensity being a measure of 1 RM. So the highest intensity lift is obviously 100%, and then lower intensity would be 60%. So the main models that I use to help my athletes, I go into huge depth on the certification, and then specific depth on the log module with regards to the log. And I even give you how to structure your week, how to structure a whole program. The first model is the Norwegian model that I've popularized. This works that predominantly 60 to 85% of max, but I see a lot of people hit new 1RMs in this because they respond well to volume and their technique improves because they're doing the lift in a multi-frequency way, and it can sometimes, not often, sorry, not every time, but sometimes improve their 1RM as well as their 6RM. But the goal there is to build that base of preparation. The wider the base, the bigger you can peak. So I would use the Norwegian block, which lasts approximately 8 weeks. Think of it as 2 4-week phases. Then I can get into a conjugate block, which can last as long as you want when it comes down to it. Within the conjugate block, you've obviously got your speed days, your heavy days, and then the repetition day, or repetition method within that. But the conjugate block is what I've used countless times to peak. I call it the heavy metal phase. So we've got the chilled, laid back, multi-frequency phase, and then we're really pushing hard. We're pushing, high levels of dopamine with those max effort phases. I don't necessarily use the max effort like Louis did, in terms of rotating a different lift every week. That does have its place, but not for everyone. But the conjugate I find is fantastic for peaking. So if you're not periodizing properly, if you're not doing your low volume work before your high intensity work, it's not necessarily going to work out. You want to start low, build back up, and then repeat the trick.